final predictions for the 2021-2022 Phoenix Suns season and a preview of the opening night game between the Suns and the Nuggets. All that coming up right here on Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, we are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, credentialed media member covering the Suns the past 5 seasons, and your host here every day. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen every single morning. Follow the show on Twitter if you do not already at Locked On PHX Suns. Follow me, your host, on Twitter at Brendon Kleen 14. Today is the day, and it is basketball time for the Phoenix Suns at long last. Jacob Padilla is my guest today, longtime Suns fan, former Suns writer, and now a staff writer over at Hale Varsity. He has graduated to bigger and better things, but he is back with us today to talk Suns. And look, you picked a busy day for it, man. How are you?
Good. Suns basketball is back in my life, so it's hard to feel bad about that. Although it wasn't the case just a couple of short years ago.
Yeah. Crazy to think. We are recording this as the first set of games is on. The Bucks playing, getting their rings, something I'm sure Suns fans did not tune into. But basketball is here for the NBA again. And as much as I wish basketball never left and the Mercury were still alive playing right now, that did not happen either. So we are back to just Suns in the Valley. And let's start things off with one final update here. Well, I want to say final. It is clearly not going to be the final update on Deandre Ayton, but one more update courtesy of Sam Amick, who did a Q&A with James Jones at The Athletic, getting some of the explanation for why no deal was done here. And then we'll get into, like I said, predictions and record, offense, defense, where the Suns finish, trades, all of that good stuff. Who's going to be on the roster, who's not going to be on the roster, and then we will also give you our preview thoughts on Suns Nuggets, which should be a really fun game. I'm excited to watch that one. I'm sure Jacob is as well. Setting aside the fact that it is a Suns game for the first time in a long time, I think that matchup could tell us some things. So we'll talk about that as well. But let's set the stage here, Jacob. Deandre Ayton, no deal. We know that. 5 years, $172 million. He didn't want to budge from the max. That was the problem, I guess, between the two sides. We heard there was a possibility of a shorter deal. James Jones confirmed that to Sam Amick, but basically said nothing really got that far down the line with those negotiations. Basically, James Jones's comment was there really were no negotiations because the team was not willing to back down, or Ayton's team, was not willing to back down from their ask of that 5-year, $172 million deal. The reason that James Jones gave that they were willing to do, which is something I went on a huge rant about yesterday, that they were willing to do a 3 or 4 year deal, but not willing to do the 5-year deal, is because, according to James Jones, they wanted the flexibility to trade for another one of these guys on a designated player extension, these rookie supermax, for a rookie contract extension deals. Devin Booker is on one. Deandre Ayton would have been number 2 for the Suns, and you could only have 2 on your roster. So that's the summation of what happened in this Q&A, what the explanation publicly is from James Jones. What do you make of that answer, Jacob? Does that satisfy your concerns here? Does that satisfy the questions that we had coming out of these negotiations, or what do you make of it?
Yeah, not really. I kind of laid out a lot of my thoughts on Twitter the other day. The overriding thing about this deal that is just so frustrating to me is everything that's happened with DeAndre Ayton, what he is as a player, is pretty much about what I expected. All the flaws, you could have seen those in him as a prospect. So yet you use your number 1 overall pick, your last big shot at a franchise-changing player, on him over other guys, obviously. And now you want to hold off on paying him because you want to try to find another one of those other guys to use in that spot instead. What I don't get is if they're going to be making a big move, whether it's for Karl Anthony Towns or somebody else, to acquire somebody better than Ayton, Ayton's probably going to have to be in the deal. Like it just, I don't really see how they can make a move to add a superstar level player while also keeping Ayton. So if
Yeah,
that's the
which
case,
yes,
why do you?
exactly.
Yeah, you would be trading him out so you could still bring back another 5-year max extension. So I just don't
Yeah.
really understand what they're trying to do here. I understand, like, yes, there's some questions about Aiton's ability to be a long-term number two piece on a franchise winning or a championship winning franchise, but you kind of backed yourself into that hole when you drafted him number one overall, and you knew that there were questions about his ability to be an offensive engine, and the defense was a question at that point. He's answered those questions.
Yeah.
He has gotten better. Obviously, it's not linear, and there's still some questions about what the motivation, all that kind of stuff. We don't know. They're there every day with them. We're not. So there are reasons to be hesitant, but I feel like it just they kind of tied themselves to Aiden when they made that pick. And now
Yeah.
that we've seen they can go win a championship or at least compete for one with this group, it just seems like they're trying too hard to um, shoot for the absolute perfect move to make here. When I just don't know how realistic that is compared to what you have right now, and which seems like a pretty good thing.
Yeah, your point is super valid. I mean, this is what you do when you draft a player number one, unless you completely screw it up, you pay them a maximum off of that deal. I mean, it's as much as we laugh about the Andrew Wiggins negotiations, for example, where Glenn Taylor basically said, "Hey, you're going to try hard? All right, here's the money." It there was no other option, right? There rarely is another option because the market dictates that these guys have that value, and that's where Aiton's been coming from the beginning, and I think that's super valid. And I think that, like you said, is just coming home to roost at this point, and they're looking for an alternative when there really isn't one, except for, I guess, playing hardball and risking losing him and risking this bad optics of a week of negative publicity and everything else that's ensued. Sam Vecini wrote another
Yep.
breakdown also at The Athletic today, where he basically outlined who the guys are that he sees as reasonable targets. You mentioned Karl Anthony Towns, somebody we've all talked about a lot because of his friendship with Devin Booker. He is a big man. I don't imagine he would ever play with Deandre Ayton, so that one doesn't make a lot of sense. Ben Simmons, I don't think makes a lot of sense from how the Suns play, the culture they want to build, the fact that they have a lot of wings. He's not a guy who would ever play with Chris Paul, certainly. So that one doesn't make a lot of sense. Michael Porter Jr. was named by Sam, and then Jamal Murray. So both of those guys have health risks, and Denver just signed them. So the bottom line is there's not an obvious target, but at the same time, I feel like you read or you listen to this James Jones interview, and you have to kind of come back to the idea that they seem to have some sort of plan in mind here. You don't go out on a public limb saying we don't want to we don't want to jeopardize our chances to be able to acquire another guy of this type of contract if you don't have something in mind already. I mean, not that they're going to forecast what that is, but that's such a very specific thing to go out there and say, which could be very well the case. Maybe they do. Pascal Siakam, a guy I know a lot of Suns fans have talked about as well. He is also on one of these contracts. I would throw his name out there as well. The other option, which is I think some of what you're getting at and what I think I've seen some people talking about online, and what I was hinting at a little bit when I said this is James Jones's public explanation, is that as bizarre and specific as it at least is an answer, right? On the other hand, a very obvious reason that you don't want to sign somebody for 5 seasons is because you just don't believe that they're necessarily somebody you want to be tied to for 5 seasons. And I think that gets you very quickly back to work ethic, commitment level, and everything else. I know I'm rambling, but I'll close out by saying I said yesterday when I was reacting in the moment to it that he's a player who has always responded to external motivation. I still think that's true. I think he could, in the short term, respond positively to this. But the fact remains, you cannot have a player who only gets motivated externally become one of your franchise cornerstones and expect to be great for a long time. I personally don't feel that way, especially when your best player is not a rah-rah type necessarily in Devin Booker. That's the issue. That's always been an issue with DeAndre Ayton. That's not going anywhere, and that's been the through line throughout his entire career, through a lot of this reporting, is the Suns are not positive that he's a guy who, when push comes to shove, can be a cornerstone. And this is what happens when you get into that stalemate. So hopefully we can flush this down the toilet for at least a month and stop talking about it. Jacob, I want to talk to you about real stuff. So let's move on really quickly here to previews, predictions, all that fun stuff. It is the first day of the season after all, and I will let you have the floor. I am done filibustering here. However, we do need to take one quick break for a word from Sweatblock, the little secret to confidence right in your back pocket. Sweatblock is a new revolutionary deodorant, and that's because it's hardly a deodorant at all. For a few weeks now, we've been talking about Sweatblock, the wipes that stop sweat for 7 days. And it seems people have been listening. We have friends of Locked On who've tried Sweatblock and love it, including a high school teacher who said he would pit out by fourth period, hear the snickers and whispers from his students. So he started having to bring a second shirt between classes. Then he heard about Sweatblock, tried it, and now he's hooked courtesy of Locked On. Another success story, a soccer player heard us talking about Sweatblock, thought it was too good to be true, but he was always the wettest guy after practicing games, soaking wet just from a little workout. So he thought he'd give Sweatblock a shot. He tried it on his pits. The next practice, they were completely dry while everything else was wet. Well, guess what? That's because he used Sweatblock on those pits and didn't use it anywhere else. He said he didn't have to reapply for 9 days, and now he is a true believer. Locked On listeners love Sweatblock, again, because it is that little secret to confidence right in your back pocket. Not just for armpits, chest, back, feet, hands, anywhere that sweats. They want me to ahem for that one. I think you know what I mean. If you or someone that you care about is dealing with excessive sweat, check out Sweatblock today. Use the promo code LOCKEDON at sweatblock.com to get 20% off your order. Again, that's sweatblock.com with promo code LOCKEDON, or check them out at Amazon and CVS. All right, Jacob, I have some prediction topics, categories for us. I'll give you the floor first. Pretty easy. Softball for you. What do you believe the Suns' record will be in 2022? Now, 72-game season last year. They won 51 games. They, got fairly lucky. They beat up on good teams. That doesn't always sustain. They stayed very healthy, but 82-game season now. How do you think they're going to do this year?
Yeah, I settled on 55 wins, I think, this year, which is baking in a little bit of regression for some of the good luck they had last year. You mentioned the record against the best teams, obviously the health to their main players. But I also think they're going to take some step forward in some areas. I feel like a couple of those guys are going to make some improvement. I feel like adding Shamet and McGee will help this team, especially in the regular season, kind of sustain winning play throughout the season. So I feel like they probably have a little bit less luck than last year, but they're still going to be one of the best teams in the West. So I settled in on 55 there, which is a few games behind their pace from last year, but still within the same range.
Yep, I'm actually right there with you. So I think on a previous show, my former guest host, Brendon, put me on the spot. It was a listener question. I was not ready. I said 58. I've completely backed down, mostly because, honestly, I think the health thing I've come a little bit more around on, just realizing I think the Suns were the third healthiest team in terms of games lost last year. That's hard to replicate. That stuff tends to really just be random, and especially when you have a point guard who's as old as Chris Paul, you got to bake in some lost games. So I think that will work to their detriment. I also think teams just don't win that many games in the NBA these days with rest and minute watches and, the nonsense in places like Brooklyn and Philadelphia and these types of stories that seem to crop up every so often. I just don't think we see these powerhouse regular season teams. So I just don't think the Suns will be there. So with that all said, I'm at 54. I already gave that prediction elsewhere, so I have to hold myself to it. 54 is what I will go with. Let me do this one now. Defensive rating per cleaning the glass last year, they were 6th in defense. I think that was probably the surprise of the year for a lot of us when the Suns came out of the gates in training camp talking about they wanted to be 10th, top 10 in defense. We were like, all right, well, let's see it. And then they very, very much did that. I don't really know if there's any reason to think it will get worse, but how do you feel? I'll give you the floor, and I'm actually going to turn some lights on, but the beauty of Bluetooth headphones, I will be able to hear you. So please let us know about your defensive guesses.
Yeah, I think they're going to be pretty solid. They've continued to make strides. We've seen players like Devin Booker take a big step up defensively, and to where he used to be a liability out there. Now he's capable of being an asset in certain situations. I kind of pulled up their synergy pro. They were 10th, or they were 9th in points per possession allowed last year, just overall. So 9th in the league last year. So they were solid top 10 defense last year. And I think they'll be in that same range, at kind of 6 to 9 range, probably. They've got enough pieces there. Now you've got McGee coming in off the bench that can kind of address one of their weaknesses last year in the second half of the season, after kind of the Sarge stuff kind of fell off the side of a cliff, and they weren't able to kind of sustain the backup minutes. Now you've got a legitimate big man that can actually defend the position and provide some length. I think that'll make a difference. And then you just see kind of continued progression from all these guys. A lot of young players that are still growing into their physical primes, let alone they're kind of adjusting to the system and everything like that. So I think they'll continue to be a top 10 defense. I don't know. I think they probably still, I don't know at this point, with Chris Paul at his age and Devin Booker kind of as your starting backcourt. I don't know if that might cap your ceiling just a little bit. And especially they don't really have too many like talented defensive guards coming off the bench. Payne can be, he can be pesky at times, but overall isn't great. And then Shamet, kind of the same thing. I don't think he's going to be a great defensive player. And same with Nader coming off the bench. So I don't know that they've got great defenders coming off the bench, particularly in the backcourt. That might limit their ceiling, but I think they'll be more than good enough to get the job done again this year.
That's where I was going to go as well. This is a point that a lot of the analytical folks out there have been making, even dating back to in the moment last year, is their bench defense had no business being as good as it was. You even mentioned Dario Saric, who obviously Suns fans love, and we know the impact and how it was felt when he got hurt, but by no means, is defense supposed to be the thing that he excels at. And yet when he was on the floor, their defense was incredible. So I think that could get worse just from normal randomness, but also, like you said, they did lose a little bit of talent there, especially like, Javon Carter not being on the floor quite as much. And
Torrey Craig for the second half of the season.
Torrey Craig, exactly. So as much as I do think JaVale McGee helps, I think a lot of bench defense is really just, can you guard individual scorers? Teams aren't really running sophisticated offense when their bench is in necessarily. A lot of the sixth men of the year types are guards who just go out there and get offense. Also, this is a little bit of a weird way to look at it, but you look at the ratings the rankings from last year, and you had Boston and Milwaukee 10 or lower. I just feel like those two teams are going to improve. Boston has Al Horford now, and they're hopefully going to have a more normal season. Milwaukee was trying a bunch of stuff in terms of switching and changing how they were playing defense. I think they obviously figured that out en route to a title, so they should be better. And I just don't see a lot of other teams in the top 10 that I think are really going to fall, unless you think New York, the Knicks, although that's also the Tom Thibodeau effect. So I don't see a lot of teams that I feel like will be worse who were in the top 10, and I see a couple who could push up. So I'm going to go with 8th. I'm going to say the Suns don't fall all the way out of it, but they do fall a bit. And some of that's random. Some of that is some of the different personnel that they have. So that's defense. Offense now, I think this is where I feel like they could be even better. They were 6th in offense as well. They were 6th in both. Ahead of them was Denver, the Clippers, Utah, Portland, and Brooklyn. I feel like you at home listening, and Jacob, you probably hear the Clippers, and that's an obvious candidate to fall off, but there are a lot of great offensive teams in this league. I just think the Suns are going to be even better. I think Devin Booker will be better. I think that uh, this team playing in its second season together will be better. I think Landry Shamet will make a huge impact. I even think JaVale McGee will make a huge impact. What he does on offense is a little bit less random and, dependent on shots going in than somebody like Dario Saric. So I think that could help. I think they're going to be a top 5 offense. I wouldn't be surprised if it was top 3. What do you think?
Well, yeah, just kind of looking at their synergy, they were second in the league in points per possession, 1.065, behind only Brooklyn, which obviously they kind of got a supernova going over there offensively with their
Yeah.
personnel.
I think betting on Brooklyn to be the top offense is a pretty safe bet. Kyrie Irving or no Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, and they're kind of clawing back into it with the Bucks tonight. But yeah, I think they'll be, like you said, top 5 for sure. I was blown away with what I saw from JaVale McGee in the preseason and just kind of the chemistry he had with Cam Johnson, Cam Payne, and those guys already. And that was something they were missing last year, is that backup option that could go finish at a Deandre Ayton level. There are so many possessions where they should have had easy buckets that Saric and Kaminsky just weren't able to finish just because of their limitations. So he doesn't give you the floor spacing that those guys did, but he gives you the rim running option, so you always have that on the floor at all times. And then you keep the obviously a guy like Cam Johnson at the 4. You've got 4 shooters out there, space on the floor around that, and that's really tough to guard. And I think Shamit will be interesting, just kind of how he fits in. I'm not quite as high on him as a lot of Suns fans are on Twitter. I'm still
Myself
kind of,
included. I'll
yeah.
throw myself in. People who listen to this know I'm unrealistically just all in on the experience already. What makes you hesitant?
Well, probably part of it is the fact that I'm a Creighton fan and he's a Wichita State guy, and there's always a bit of a rivalry there. So I'm just kind of naturally opposed to Wichita State players. But also, I mean, there's 2 teams have already moved on from him. He wasn't a huge part of the Brooklyn playoff rotation last year. He shot the ball pretty well throughout his career, but he hasn't been great defensively. So I know that Monty Williams is high on him and feels like he can unlock more of his game. And during the preseason, it looked like they did at least a little bit of that. Numbers were pretty good. I think about 18 and 4.5 assists a game per 36. That is during the preseason on really good shooting percentages. So, but also he's going to be your 4th guard. So
Sure.
I guess
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see kind of the minutes allocation between Payne
Yeah.
and Shamit. But I think just having both of them back there, so regardless of how many games Chris Paul plays, how many minutes he plays, you've got some more reliable creation coming off the bench in the backcourt. As long as those guys stay healthy, it gets a little scary if you have 1 or 2 of those guys go down, because then you're talking about Elfrid Payton. And
We just don't. Yeah, don't talk about Alfred Payton. It's easier
um,
that way.
but so yeah, I think and Cam Johnson continued to expand his game. Mikal Bridges continuing to expand his game. I think they've got a chance to again be an elite offense, just with the way that Monty Williams has coached this team. And I'll be
Yeah.
interested to see. I don't know what we can expect Devin Booker to do as far as taking another leap this year, just based on how short the offseason was and how little time he got off to rest and recover and then kind of get back in the gym. But there are some
Yeah.
areas of his game that if he is able to clean up the turnovers, if he's able to get that 3-point shot down just a little bit more, that this offense could really take another leap. They
Yeah.
still won't. They're not going to be up there in terms of the ability to get to the rim and finish. You're relying on basically Ayton and McGee rolling to the rim at this point, beyond
Mhm.
transition plays. But that's the way they built this roster. So that probably kind of puts a little bit of a cap, just because you're living with a higher degree of difficulty shot profile. But you've got guys that can make those shots at a high enough rate that that they still come out one of the best in the league.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to go as well. The one thing that I think fans or general NBA fans, general NBA analysts have criticized about the Suns or picked at about how they could be a little bit worse than last year, especially on offense, is, they were 7th in 3-point accuracy last season. And, you dig into that second spectrum and those types of places where they grade your shot quality versus how many you actually make. Those numbers tend to paint the Suns pretty poorly, or, not quite as good as they were, where they were generating mediocre, pretty good looks, but making them at an insane rate. If that gets a little closer to what the numbers say it should be, then you get a little worse as a shooting team. Mid-range, although I think the Suns, like, you look at having Devin Booker and Chris Paul, you probably say, well, they should be the best mid-range team in the NBA. They were also just smoking hot, like unfathomably good from mid-range, made almost half of those shots. Maybe you just say that continues, but if Mikal Bridges is trying things a little bit more, if he's experimenting, maybe some of those numbers go down. But I can't really convince myself out of it. My prediction is that they will be the third best offense in the NBA. I think Brooklyn and I think Utah just are going to be regular season powerhouses there. I think Utah's figured out how to maximize that roster. I think Brooklyn can just waltz into having an elite offense. And as long as Harden and KD play a lot and their shooters make shots, like, that's pretty easy to imagine. So that's my guess. We will have some who will be and who will not be on the roster predictions coming up right after another quick break. First, though, a quick word from Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar ever, my favorite protein bar. And Built Bar likes to say the healthiest candy bar ever. It's probably a more accurate way to say it. They are covered in 100% chocolate. They're soft and easy to chew, not like those bricks that other places try to give you. You can do protein without having it be hard and crunchy and obnoxious. And Built Bar has figured that out. They have cracked the code. They have delivered it in the form of delicious flavors: coconut, cherry, raspberry, mint. My personal favorite, double chocolate. You know what you're getting in each and every Built Bar. That is 17 to 18 grams of protein, just 4 or 5 grams of sugar. They make them delicious without packing them in sugar. I don't know how they do it. It doesn't matter how they do it. The point is they are delicious and they get the job done. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order. Not first order, next order. You can double dip with this as always. Promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Today's show also brought to you by BetOnline AG, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline is back and better than ever with a new web interface, which means more props, odds, and lines than ever before and easier to access than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action all season long. Use the promo code LOCKEDON when you make your first deposit to get a 50% welcome bonus. Again, go to betonline.ag on the web or on their mobile app. Make an account today, and when you do, use the promo code LOCKEDON to get a 50% welcome bonus straight to your account. BetOnline, once again, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Jacob, floor is yours once again here. Does Jalen Smith stay on the roster through the end of the season?
Yeah, that's a question there. Looking at the roster, there aren't a ton of holes, and I don't know that there are a ton of like easily tradable assets that you can get a good return for. I'll say he does stick around. I think they give him the year. Jay Crowder's coming up. The end of his contract's coming up soon. Obviously, he's later on in his career. I think you looked at Cam Johnson stepping into that role, but then you've got Smith potentially. I think they would be able to step into whether backup 4, playing more of the 5, but behind Ayton if he sticks around long term. We talked about that at the top. We're not really sure what the plan is there, but he's James Jones at least giving the impression that he has one. But I think they'll give him a chance to keep developing, because I just don't know what you're going to get for him. If they can put together some kind of Thad Young trade or something like that, obviously that's the one that a lot of people were talking about in the offseason. Maybe I don't think they'd hesitate to include him in a deal like that. I just don't know if they're going to be able to pull that off, if that's going to materialize. I wouldn't be surprised to see them make some kind of move on the margins, similar to the Torrey Craig deal last year. Just take a shot on a guy, see if he can come in, because I feel like
with that extra roster spot.
Yeah, they got that spot, and I feel like that's probably the one kind of spot on the roster that you could use a little bit more depth, is a Torrey Craig-like physical backup wing that gives you a little bit more versatility. Because I'm not a huge Abdul Nader guy, and I was Chandler Hutchison is on a two-way, so I don't think they're factoring him into the
talk about
discussion too
him
much.
even less than we talk about Elfrid Payton.
Yes, so I forgot about him
He
for a
is,
moment.
I
But
will say, got to be up close with Chandler Hutchison for the first time. He happened to be warming up on the floor, on the court in the practice facility next to where we wait for the media. The one time I went to practice so far this year, he is a tall man, more so than you would guess. So he does have size, but I don't think he'll be playing much at all for the Suns this year.
He looks the part. That's why he got drafted where he did.
He looks the part. Yes,
hasn't quite played it so far in the NBA, but so I could see them making kind of a deal on them. It'll either be, I think, if you're moving on from Smith, I think it'll be for like a Thad Young level player, someone that can come in and instantly be either a starter or a key backup that'll play big minutes off the bench. If that doesn't happen, I don't see them making a huge move. Otherwise, this year I don't see an Ayton move. I don't really see, because we talked about, I don't know who they'd be trading for anyway. So I think we could see them make some deadline moves, whether it's a minor trade, whether it's a buyout candidate, something like that. We could be at the point where maybe the Suns become a buyout destination for at least one guy that they could get coming off the finals run last year. And if they continue to have success this year, so that could be an option. But for the most part, I think the Suns are probably going to play with this main rotation as it is now.
Chris Paul, over or under 60 games played?
I'll go over 60 out of an 82 game season. Okay. I think with Payne and I think they'll be smart with him. Obviously, he's not a guy that's going to be interested in sitting out a lot of games. But yeah,
where would you put the line then? Where's the point where you would have said under? Like,
so he 70 out of 72 last year. He played 70 the year before.
He's been a perfect bill of health the past 2 years. Is what makes it so impossible to predict. Like, if you're just going off of his track record, you'd say, of course, he's going to play 80.
Yeah. The 3 years before that was 58, 58, 61, but then he was back up 74, 82. So
it's those plant-based meals, man. He figured something out.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to that. A little bit of luck, and as players age, that does make a difference, kind of how they take care of their bodies. And again, between I think Paul doing that and the Suns trying to be as smart as possible with him, it's just amazing that he made it through the entire season healthy, and then had like 5 different things happen to him
in the opening quarter of the first playoff game. It all came tumbling down. Yeah, I would say I think I go over 60 as well. I'm really torn. I don't think he'll rest, but I also feel like I've talked about this before. Under the radar, his minutes have gone down, the past couple of years, even as he's making this big show of I told Sam Presti no to his face. I'm not doing that. It's like, okay, well then you played like 3 minutes fewer per game than you had before, and then you did about another minute fewer per game when you got to Phoenix. So I wouldn't be surprised if the minutes dipped again, and maybe he does miss some back-to-backs here and there. The schedule will be nicer this season than it had been last year, and of course the bubble and all the bizarre scheduling quirks of that situation was its own monster as well. So I would say over.
Probably if you had given me 70, that's one where I could have I could see him easily playing like 67 games this year or something like that. That's one where I would have had to think about it pretty hard. I could see 70, 75, 67, kind of either way on either side of that. And like you said, they keep his minutes down, play him 30 a game. You give Payne the rest of those backup minutes, and you can still feel like you have a chance to succeed in the regular season as long as Payne doesn't regress back to what he was before he got to Phoenix.
Yeah, I'd say I'll go 72 to 75 or so. I think they can keep him happy by saying, "Oh no, you have a calf injury. Like that's why you're out. You're not resting, right?" And like whatever, we'll do the public game of all of that. And I think the smartest plan is for him to rest. But I think Payne being locked in and trustworthy from the jump is a part of this season that's going overlooked too. That wasn't there last year. I mean, coming into last season, we were all asking, was the bubble real for Cam? And now there's no doubt that he can handle 25 minutes a night if you want him to. So I think that'll impact things as well. Very random one. You may not have an opinion on this. Does by the beginning of next season has Nike announced a Devin Booker signature shoe?
Yeah, yeah, I'm not really a shoe guy. I don't know how that all works. I'll guess no.
Okay, yeah,
But
that's probably the safer guess. I don't get why not. I'm not a huge shoe guy either. I'm fascinated by it just as like somebody who cares about the NBA. I have a grand total of one pair of sneakers, and it's because they were on incredible discount, and then I promptly hardly ever wear them because I'm not used to doing that. But I don't get how Trey Young and some of these guys can have one and Devin Booker cannot, especially because they've done some of these like special releases of the Kobe's and different things like that for Booker. Like they clearly want to do it, and I think that I think he could, but I would probably say no as well. All right.
they win a championship this year. I think Nike would be smart to capitalize on that for sure.
I would think so. He's a very popular guy. He's literally
Yeah,
dating a member of the Kardashian family. It seems like easy money.
yeah,
You've already brought him into the design lab before. It's not as if this is some stranger that just got signed to Nike. He's been around for a bit, so get it done. Um, okay, the last one that I had for you was what's going to happen? Where is the ultimate fate of this Sun season headed?
uh, yeah. Because I'm a Suns fan and I can't ever get too high. I'll say it ends in the Western Conference Finals again. I mean, I could see them.
You mean
I
they lose in the
definitely
conference finals, or they win them and then lose in the finals?
lose in the conference finals. I'll just say.
Okay. Okay.
I again, like I just because we can't have nice things, and I'm assuming something's going to go wrong at some point because that's what my entire experience as a Suns fan has been. But I I think they'll be a strong contender. They're going to be I think a contender for the finals all season long, and whether it's Utah figuring something out, whether it's the Lakers getting healthy and being healthy at the right time and just kind of overwhelming. I'm still a little hesitant about that roster, but I was when they won the championship as well. So at the end of the day, LeBron and Anthony Davis might just be that good. So we'll see. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would not be surprised if again to see them back. I think they certainly got the pieces to get back to the finals where they were last year. But just that's a lot to go to the finals last year, get the a 3 month off season, then come back and to be able to run it back all the way again and stay as healthy as they were last year and have everything go their way. But again, like this is just me speaking as a damaged Suns fan now. If you pick the Suns to go to the finals, I'm like, yeah, Sun, that sounds reasonable.
Sure. No, I'm gonna make people upset probably. Um, because I feel like it's almost like it's kind of the thing of picking a series and it's like either you're playing a great team and it's like LeBron, Jordan, whatever. You're like the Suns will either steal it in 6 if they happen to have the higher. It was like this with the LeBron in the first round last year, right? It's like either the Suns win it at home in like 5 or somehow sneak it out in 6 and the series just really goes their way, or they lose. You don't pick them to win game 7, right? So in that same way, I'm like I feel like picking the Suns to lose the finals is just such a depressing thing to do. It's like, oh, the same crappy way you felt a few months ago, get ready for that again.
Yeah,
That's pretty disappointing. But that's kind of how I feel because the East scares me so much
yeah,
more than the West. So like I get your point. Things just there's going to be so much that changes between now and then. You're kind of just saying like generally speaking, that feels like about where they'll end up, and I hear you. But when I go through the West, I'm like I do feel better about the Suns than most other teams, unless Denver gets healthy or the Clippers get healthy, or this Russ thing really just goes beautifully for the Clipper or for the Lakers. I don't really see another situation that terrifies me. So I'm going to say that the Suns will lose in the finals again, even though I know that that's going to be devastating to people. I'm sorry. That's how I feel.
I let me. It was a disappointing end, but right now you tell me the Suns are going back to the finals. I'd take that right away. I'd
Hey,
sign up for that
Jazz
again.
fans, like as much as it sucked, like you ask a Jazz fan, I'm sure they would trade. They wouldn't trade those back-to-back losses to Jordan for like a 500 season those
Yeah.
years. Like, I mean, come on, it's still winning. It's still fun. Okay, my last thing for you before we get out of here. What are you looking for in this Suns Nuggets series? We went a little long here, but last thoughts here as we get people out the door and ready for game one.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that coming out of all the DeAndre Ayton drama, the Suns open up with Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. Like, oh,
Yeah.
hey, go to work, big man. Or
Yeah.
wait, he doesn't like being called that. But yeah, it's a really fun game to open the season. That's for
It
sure.
is.
I noticed. I saw. I think Evan Sider talk about how Monty Williams talked about Jokic, obviously, and then Will Barton as the other guy they're worried about. Just kind of the disdain they have for Michael Porter Jr. So I'm looking forward to that. Just kind of the back
Yeah,
and forth.
nothing like that's what I was gonna say. Nothing like the confidence boost
Yeah.
of not that there's any bad vibes. I don't really
Yeah.
believe the DeAndre thing is gonna like hamper anybody, but like confidence boost to start the season. Hey, go play the team you decimated like 3 months ago. Have fun.
Yeah, and so that'll be fun to see just kind of how Porter comes back and handles playing the Suns again. Just kind of the game within the game there of the Suns trying to target him and him trying to stay out on the floor, and because again the Nuggets are going to need him without Jamal Murray for most of, if not all, the season.
Yeah.
But they'll be a little bit healthier than they were the last time. They'll have some more options in the backcourt that'll make it more competitive. I think the Suns will come out and play well and get the win, but anytime you match up with Jokic, the Nuggets are going to have a chance for sure.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. I focus too much on this stuff. The Suns handled small ball fine, but I still am just so fascinated by a small team whenever they play against the Suns. And the Nuggets aren't small in their starting unit. Of course, Aiton has shown he can handle Jokic, but they are now going to be playing pretty small in the backup unit with Jeff Green and JaMychal Green there. And, the flexibility that they have with some of their wings and guards and everything else, they do space you out and move the ball, and they are so clinical. With JaVale McGee back there now instead of Dario Saric, I am interested there just from a matchup perspective. And then, yeah, I really am just looking to see the Sun stuff. Like, I kind of wish this matchup might have been like game 3 or 4 because I'm going to be so focused on what do the Suns look like that like some of the lessons to take away of like, oh, they did this against, MPJ and how did Gordon factor in? Like, I'm going to probably lose that stuff because I just want to see, like you said, how many minutes does Landry Shamet play? Do they play him with Devin Booker and Chris Paul? Do they play campaign? Do they play more of those lineups that we saw in the playoffs from the jump this regular season? How many minutes does Cam Johnson get compared to Jay Crowder, which is another subplot this year that I've talked about? So that's a lot of, what the rotation looks like and what do the new pieces do here and do, are there any obvious holes? Like is the absence of Torrey Craig just obvious from the jump? I don't know. But that's kind of what I have my eye on. But that'll wrap us up, guys. Enjoy the game. Enjoy your Wednesday. I will be back right after the buzzer. Thank you to Jacob Padilla. You can follow him at Jacob Padilla _. No longer giving us his published thoughts on the Suns, but his Twitter account is look, he's actually pretty reasonable. So you guys might want to follow him so that you're not talking to yourselves into a tizzy every day like we have all been doing lately. But anyway, yes, enjoy the game, guys. Talk to you right afterward. And let's get it.